France 24's Rob Parsons joins me on the set to talk a bit more about this. Rob, how big a concession is this mention of neutrality for the Ukrainian president?
It is a significant concession by the Ukrainians, because before, as we know, they had set their hearts on gaining NATO membership, even if it was a desire that was probably going to be out of reach for many years. But in principle, they wanted to do it, and NATO never said that you couldn't because of its open door policy. Now they're saying that they're prepared to accept neutrality, but not just on any terms. Neutrality that has to be guaranteed by third parties, for instance, the United States, the United Kingdom, and perhaps others. And first of all, before any discussion can take place of neutrality being introduced, the Russians have to withdraw their troops. That's obviously an important consideration, and at this stage it doesn't seem as though the Russians are prepared for that. It should be said that one of the demands of the Russians, as we just heard President Zelensky point out, was that Ukraine should be a neutral state. So the Ukrainians are taking a step towards the Russians. The problem, of course, from the Ukrainian perspective is that knowing precisely what it is that the Russians want is very difficult. It was before the war started, and perhaps even more difficult now. President Putin has put forward a range of demands, some of which don't relate entirely to or solely to Ukraine. Like, for instance, that countries that join NATO after 1997 should be forced to leave NATO. That NATO should pull back its rockets and so on from Eastern Europe. So, there are a lot of things that are up there which can't be settled by a declaration of neutrality. But it is a step forward, no question about it. One thing he is saying, though, is that there should be no discussion of denazification or demilitarization, because there is nothing to denazify. So he's being absolutely categorical about that. There will be no discussion on those 2 points.
This, of course, coming now as the war has been going on for over a month now. What are the latest developments on what's happening on the ground?
Well, the Russians, as we know, at the end of last week, said that they were shifting their objectives away from of what seems to have been a failed objective to take over the country, to capture Kiev and overthrow the government, to concentrating on eastern Ukraine, on the self-declared republics of Donetsk and Luhansk. Quite what that means at this stage we don't really know, because there hasn't been an awful lot of change on the battlefield. But the implication seems to be that the Russians will try to concentrate their military efforts in that area in the east of the country, that they will probably try and break through in the north of the country around Kharkiv, where there's fighting been going on for the last month, and from the south around Mariupol, and try and form a sort of pincer movement which will blockade Ukrainian troops that are fighting in the east in a pocket. It may not work, of course, and the Ukrainians seem pretty confident that if the Russians do attempt to do that, because of the size of the country, it's enormous. It's 10% bigger than France. So if you consider the spaces that have to be filled by the Russian occupying force, it's no simple task. And given the difficulties they're having with supplies, logistics at the moment, one can understand why the Ukrainians perhaps feel quite optimistic about how this might develop, particularly as we're moving into a new phase of the operation. Winter is over now. It's going to become, for the next couple of months, because the ground is so soft, harder for Russia to move its armor around, but much more easy for Ukrainian partisans to conceal themselves because of the leaf cover. Much of the country is covered by forest. There will be considerably more opportunities for ambushes and that sort of thing. The Ukrainians have large forces already behind Russian lines, and the more extended the Russian troops become, the easier it will become for the Ukrainians to attack them. So, it's all up in the air at this stage.
All right, Rob, thanks for that. France 24's Chief Foreign Editor, Rob Parsons.